Hey there, this is Steve Westman from the Audiophiles. Welcome to another fun edition of our roundtable discussion. If you haven't already, hit that subscription button. It helps my channel out a ton. It helps me grow. And if you're in the Vancouver area, you need speakers, you need hi-fi equipment, you know where to come. The Hi-Fi Center here at 433 Carroll, downtown Vancouver. Now let's get to our roundtable discussion on the other side of the Audiophiles. Right. Hi, everyone. Steve Westman from the Audiophile. Another fantastic roundtable discussion. I've got my wingman, Nathan Goss. Nathan, hello.
Hello.
I've got Tim Tolbert from the University of Vinyl. Tim, hello, from Colorado. Is it snow there still? Or are you guys warm now?
Spring is arriving. Thank God.
Nice. We were really warm in Vancouver. It was like California weather here on the weekend. So I think I almost have a tan on my pasty skin. And then I have Arnaldo Durso. Hello, sir. How are you? From Fidelio's underscore frequency at YouTube. Did I get it right?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh my God, I spent all morning thinking, okay, am I going to get this one right? So that's good. And then today's roundtable replacing the irreplaceable Norman Mazzy Maslow, but I've got a special guest today, Robert Brook. He's a lifelong audio enthusiast and writer who also shares his, I guess, unconventional approach to analog audio and his insights on record collecting. And you also are an editor of a website called The Broken Record, I believe, Robert?
Well, it's my site, but I have other contributors and I edit everything that the contributors send me before I post it. So
excellent. So yeah, it's called is it just thebrokenrecord.com then?
Brokenrecord.net.
.net. There you go. Thank you.
Yeah.
So today's topic, I know there's lots. I mean, we always want to talk about audiophile pressings and the news and releases today. But I thought it'd be fun to bring Robert on because, we want to learn more about, or talk more about why do some records sound better than others? Do all the audiophile pressings sound the best that are now repressed or reissued by Mobile Fidelity or Craft or Analogue Productions, or should we stick with the original, some of the original stuff that's out there from years ago? And I know Robert will have a lot to say about that. So I want to start today maybe with Robert. I mean, go right ahead. You're the guest today, and I want my other guys here to interject when you can. Thoughts on why do you think some of the records sound better? Some of the older records sound better. I know you do a lot of record comparisons, and you've done some stuff or bought some stuff from Better Records, Tom Port's website. So I think, let's talk about that. Why do you feel sometimes some of the audiophile pressings aren't sound as great as some of the older stuff?
To be honest, Steve, I really wish I knew the answer to that question. Because, if I'm being perfectly honest, if there was a record company that could put out a record that sounded as good to me as the pressings that I'm spending most of my time playing, I'd buy it, because vintage records are just getting more and more expensive and harder to come by in good condition, and there's more competition for them. And, so I'd be all in favor of somebody making records that I put it on and I think, wow, that's a record that I really want to listen to. But I just find that as I've just spent more time listening, more time doing shootouts, more time basically rebuilding my stereo to get at a sound that I could get at a little bit before with a few records, and now I'm getting at more and more with more records as my stereo's changed. It moves me. And the contemporary audiophile records that I listen to, they don't have that effect on me. And, like I said, I really wish they did.
Tim, your thoughts?
Well, it's a loaded question, but I think there's some psychology involved. You're holding a record that was I've got an example here, Bayou Country. You're maybe kind of, you've got the shock and awe of the patina of the record in your hand. But this is one of the best sounding OG pressings that I have. I think in the 60s, the 70s, into the 80s, we were at the high water mark for vinyl. It was a state of the art. Everything was engineered great. There were the superstars as far as the mastering engineers were concerned, everybody from Robert Ludwig to Lee Holko to George Mariano and others. All of those things have something to do with it. And the way that I operate, I have kind of a period correct setup. So I have vintage equipment. I've got a integrated Macintosh amp. I've got Boston acoustic speakers from like 1992. Everything's been recapped and brought up to spec. But that's the way I'm enjoying it. And I kind of agree with Robert. You know, I'm kind of underwhelmed. There's kind of a clinical digital cold atmosphere for some of these reissues. And then you put something like this that just kind of rolls and explodes out of your speakers, and there's plenty of air there. There's a lot of separation of instruments. There's a great sound stage. I can go on, but that's my initial foray.
Arnaldo.
Do you guys agree or not?
Well,
Arnaldo.
okay. So, there's a lot of good stuff that I agree with, that you guys have said. I do find that some newer pressings, and I have to cite an example. I mean, I don't have the original pressing of Exodus, but the air that Tim was talking about amongst the instruments on the new UHQR, I hear it. I totally hear the space in between the instruments. I totally hear Marley's voice floating in the middle with everything surrounding it. So again, I don't have the original pressing. I just have a digital repress that was done in like 2014 or 2015. And I've been trying to get an original pressing, at least a US pressing, to compare. So that's a brand new repress, a brand new remaster that I, welcome favorably. Then there are others, like I was actually just reading today. I haven't had a chance. I was actually on the fence about buying the Cure Wish album. And there was a review that I read that totally said that it was terrible. Like comparing it to the original that came out, it sounds much more compressed. And it's not a really old recording either. It's like 30th anniversary, so I think it was done in the 90s. And it was, I believe, directly to tape. So who knows what they did to it? Like there was every indicator that they could have done a AAA release of it. Maybe I believe Miles Showell cut that one, cut the new version of Wish. So maybe the digital step did have, some kind of influence in how the record turned out to be. And we don't know what Robert Smith decided how he wanted the record to sound. So,
right.
But I did want to, if I may, show one of my picks for the panel. And it's a record that you don't hear championed a lot about for its sound, more for its scarcity and for the fact that it hasn't been repressed since it came out. And it's Buckingham Nicks.
Yep.
This was actually the standard by which Mick Fleetwood chose the recording studio Sound City. He went to visit Sound City where Keith Olsen was mixing or finishing up this album, and he played songs from this album. And not only did he recruit Lindsey Buckingham and subsequently Stevie Nicks, but he brought, of course, I think Keith Olsen, right? Yeah, Keith Olsen was the engineer for the Fleetwood Mac's self-titled, and Richard Dasha, who was the assistant engineer on this, became the producer and engineer on Rumours. So I don't know if you guys have a copy of this.
I do, yes.
Yeah.
It's just busting out of the speakers, like the guitar, the drums, the bass. It's just, I think it sounds amazing. So I guess probably the engineer
too. It sounds great. It's a Robert Ludwig mastering job.
Because I was looking for the
one that
master.
I have this, but
I was looking for the master and couldn't find it, so I'm not really sure if it's a Robert Ludwig.
It's a great
All of
song.
Lindsay's solo stuff is incredible too. All of his solo stuff throughout the 80s is unbelievably great sounding. All of Lindsey Buckingham's stuff, solo stuff.
Yep.
Law and Order.
Love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have that one. And Go Insane, I think the first
Yep.
first one, Go Insane.
Yep. Incredible sounding.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, you look at that Buckingham Nicks album. It has a lot of that same sound on the Rumours album, and of course on their Fleetwood Mac album that came out just before Rumours, and it has the Lindsey Buckingham guitar sound, right? I mean, that's what I think Mick Fleetwood wanted to capture, and it's definitely captured on those two Fleetwood Mac albums, that's for sure. And that's actually a very underrated album, and it's bloody expensive now to get on the aftermarket on Discogs, right?
It's hard to find a very good copy of it, like one that's not beat to death.
Yeah.
That's a good example. If we are talking about a really well done reissue that I think might be better than the original, would be the Rumours Double 45, Kevin Gray and Hoffman. That is an amazing sounding record, and it's got everything you're looking for or you're listening for compared to the OG. And I think they did the self-titled album as well, but that's really fun.
I have that as well. Yeah.
I had Kevin on last week, and I did ask him about the 45 RPM. I said, Kevin, did you and Hoffman compare it to the original before when you cut it? They said no, Hoffman didn't want to do that. It was just whatever he wanted it to sound like at the time. So that's Hoffman's sound on that 45 RPM cut that you're hearing.
Interesting.
Yeah. Robert, what do you think? Like, I mean, you probably you have a lot of OG stuff, right? Do you know much do you have any of the Rumours albums, or do you have your favorite sounding Rumours album or Fleetwood Mac album?
Favorite sounding. Wow.
Or best sounding, sure.
Well, actually, one of my favorite sounding Fleetwood Mac albums is what is it? The Fleetwood Mac's not greatest hits. Let me see. The original Fleetwood Mac. I love the sound of this record. It's really stripped down, live in the studio. Like I can't get enough of that stuff. It sounds big, it sounds powerful. It's a great performance. This copy just happens to sound particularly good. I thought I was buying a UK pressing, ended up with a Dutch pressing.
Oh, wow.
Sounds excellent. So that's probably one of my favorites. I've spent some time with Rumours. I've had a few copies. I borrowed a MoFi. Not the MoFi. I borrowed actually Kevin Gray's recut of Rumours. Actually,
so the 45 RPM. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had that for a while. Wrote some notes about it somewhere I could dig up. And I had a couple other early pressings and ended up landing on just one particular one that just really comes to life. It's actually, I found a difficult record to get right. If I recall, my impression of the Kevin Gray cut was, I could be completely off base here. So, so who knows? Kevin would have to weigh in himself, but I felt like he was trying to bring the vocals out more, because I find the vocals can really get lost in the mix on that record sometimes, unless you have a really good pressing of it. And so I felt like he made an effort to try to bring the vocals a little bit more to the front, which I liked about it. There were some other things about it I didn't like. I don't know. I'd have to look at my notes. It's a while since I did that. I played that record. But I think it, going back to the Buckingham Nicks, it definitely a good pressing has that sound where it just kind of leaps out at you. It's really exciting to listen to. But there's also some passages there where the vocals get really loud and all the instruments get really loud. And if it doesn't resolve really well up top, it starts to get kind of congested and it starts to get kind of loud. And it doesn't make you want to play it any louder, and it makes you want to turn the volume down. And for me, any record that you want to start turning the volume down, that's a problem in my book. You know, I like to just keep going until, you know, as far with the volume until, like, I find actually that's a good way to evaluate records. You know, if I can't turn it up as loud as I can stand it and still enjoy listening to it, then, you know, usually that's where the things that I don't like about that particular copy really start to show up for me.
Well, that's interesting. I know I've had Tom Port on from Better Records. I mean, I know, Robert, you know Tom as well. And his business model is fascinating. It's a little bit controversial for a lot in the audiophile industry. I think maybe because the prices are so high. I mean, I was looking on the website yesterday. There's some jazz titles that he's, you know, charging what, $799 and up for, and saying that they're, you know, sonically the best
really
out there.
Expensive, definitely, yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, are they the best ones to get? I mean, and then just a second part to this too. It's like, that's why I feel like the MoFis and the Analog Production, the Craft, all these companies are doing quite well, because they're capturing this price point right now. Maybe not the 125 for the UHQRs, but like, you know, some sort of price point between the $30 and $60 range for an audio file quality pressing, which people can afford. So I mean, I think that's where the market's captured right now. Whereas, you know, someone's not going to jump out and buy an $800 Art Pepper record because it, you know, it sounds the best. I think that's really where we're at. I mean, and I like Better Records business model, obviously. I mean, if you don't like it, you know, return it. I think that's fantastic. I don't have any issues at all with what they're doing. I think everyone's allowed to make their own purchasing choices, just like people buy MoFi because they like the way it sounds even after the whole DSD gate or whatever it might be. So for me, I have no issues with it at all. Maybe you can get into that. I know I want you guys all to sort of jump in as well.
Yeah, I'd love to, actually. Well, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's face it, like, you know, they're the only business that's really, I mean, other than like local record stores, you know, and people like me who are selling on Discogs, they're the only ones making money off used records, right? I mean, you know, the money, you know, in terms of the industry, it's got to be driven by new records. And so you have to put new stuff out. I mean, I get all that, and I don't have any problem with any of that. But for me personally, and for the approach to this whole collecting and audio thing that's really gotten me excited, it's about pushing for, you know, the pinnacle of what you can get out of a vinyl record. You know, you know, when I talk about this on my site, you know, if, you know, I've written about some, you know, a few heavy vinyl titles on there. I've got quite a few. I was doing these vintage versus reissue. I did this kind of series for a while where I was doing a bunch of posts like this, and then I did one about the Blue Note tone poets, because I was on Instagram a lot at the time, and I noticed that a lot of the jazz collectors on Instagram, they were posting these tone poets, and they're saying, these sound so great, you know, and so I thought, well, I'll buy a couple of these and I'll see how they sound. And, you know, I listened to them, and, you know, I bought Lee Morgan Cornbread and Roots and Herbs. Forgetting the artist name off right now. Anyhow, so I bought these two and I played them, and, you know, and they did sound good. I mean, they were, you know, like good records. I had no like quibble with like the fact that they were good, they were well done. But were they great? Like, were they the kind of record that you go, man, I love this record? You know, that you then go to your audio shop and you're shopping for a new amp, or you're shopping for a new set of speakers, and you're like, this is the record I want to play. And so I wrote up something and I said, you know, these are good records, but, you know, if what you're really interested in is, you know, reaching for the stars here, which is what I'm interested in, that's what I'm writing about, that's what I'm advocating for. It's not for everybody, you know, it's for people who are really excited about this, really motivated by this. Then these are not the records that are going to get you there. They're just not, they don't have the air, the space. They don't have the live sound of you're in the room with the musician's sound. So you asked us to pick 3 records, Steve. So here's a record that makes you think you're right there in the studio with these guys. I mean, even if you don't even have a great copy of this, it does that to you. I didn't have that experience with the 2 Tone Poets I bought, and I didn't want to keep buying them and spending money on them. And frankly, if it doesn't move me, I don't care how much I like the music, for better or for worse, I never play the record. And that's why for me, like, it's worth it to spend. I've never bought $800 records from Better Records. It's out of my price point. But I've spent $350, $400 on records for them, and I have no problem with that, because I play that record and I'm thrilled every single time. Where I've got records that I bought, like collectible records that I've spent, $50, $100, $150 on. I never play them just because I'm just not interested. They don't do anything for me when they're on the turntable.
Nathan, your thoughts now. I'd like to hear from you.
Oh, where my mind was actually going as I was listening to Robert is, for me at least, it comes down to availability, right? So, like Analogue Productions did a reissue of that Helen Merrill record, and prior to that release, that record, an original copy of that was like anywhere between $1,000 and $2,000. And you're also taking a gamble of whether it's clean, right? Whether it's in good condition and it's clean and doesn't, sound like Rice Krispies whenever you play it. So to go out and get a reissue of that record for between $40 and $60 or whatever I think that reissue went for, knowing that it plays clean and sounds good. I mean, does it sound as good as maybe the original does? I don't know, because I don't have the 2 to compare side by side. But to me, to get what I would consider a bargain of getting something like that for a fraction of the price, knowing that it at least plays clean and sounds pretty darn good. It may not be the highest point whenever you're searching for perfection, right? You may have to take a few notches down from that, but to have it available and to know that you can buy 30 of those for what an original goes for. I mean, to me, it's a
cost benefit analysis, right?
it really is. But then you have examples like Mobile Fidelity's reissues of the Stevie Wonder records, like Talking Book. I would much rather listen to my dirty original copy that doesn't sound that good, but has all the dynamics and all the fidelity and all the goods that record should have, versus the neutered, butchered, drab, awful, fill in your blank of all the.
So Nathan doesn't like this one. It's a silver label too, just so the viewers know.
It is dreadful. It is unlistenable in my opinion. So for every reissue that you get that's a bargain that sounds maybe on par, if not slightly better than original, there's obviously many versions that Mobile Fidelity, Analogue Productions, and other companies have reissued that aren't going to meet those marks. And that's why us having these conversations is good, because we can cite examples from both sides, right? To me, the Blood, Sweat, and Tears One Step is the best version of that album. It doesn't, when I listen to that, the horns hit you right in the face. The air is there, right? All the things that we're talking about, it pops right off, into the room with you. The original copy that I have doesn't have that. So to me, that reissue, to get the one-step reissue of that album, is a bargain for how good it sounds. And I still think it's the best sounding one-step that Mobile Fidelity has released.
Arnaldo.
Yes. I don't have that one.
You don't have which one?
I don't have the Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
I've heard it. I actually wrote an article about it.
I can't comment on either an original or on the. I'm familiar with the record, and I've seen it in the dollar bins, like ad nauseum, like $5 or And so I've been tempted to pick up a copy because I didn't. I believe now the one step is actually sold out, but I've also seen the one step around quite a bit. Well, I have a second pick, and this is something that I don't know if any of you will argue it. when it
Come on,
first
Nathan will. Don't worry, he will.
Okay.
No, I won't. Nope.
Yeah.
So, okay, playing in Analog Productions camp.
Love it.
Another record that was recorded beautifully, I think, and Robert Ludwig did this, I believe. And this is the double 45. This, like, I could throw my CD copy out because there's just like no comparison at all. I've like,
Nope.
I know it came out originally probably on a single disc vinyl back in, I think, 93 when it came out. But I think this one sounds great. And this is one of the typical examples where, you know, the vinyl will trump the CD at any time. I mean, it has the dynamics. Of course, it's cut at 45 RPM, so it's got a lot of room, a lot of low end. And I don't know, any thoughts? Can anyone argue that one?
I can't
Nope.
argue that. I mean, I have both the CD and that pressing and a crappier repress from years ago, and definitely the 45 trumps it.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah, I've got the same pressing. Sounds amazing. Great album. I've never heard it better than that one for sure.
And honestly, I don't know. Do you guys know if it was digitally recorded or was it on analog?
So that was back in 92, 93. I mean, who knows? I mean, we can't speculate, but I'm going to say it was probably tape. That's my guess.
In any case, as long as it sounds good, does it really matter?
Well, that goes back to the whole DSD thing, right? With MoFi. I mean, did anyone even know? Everyone loved MoFi when it wasn't DSD. All of a sudden, they hate MoFi because it's DSD. But before they knew, they were selling out all the time. But you go to their website, I mean, everything's available forever and ever now. I mean, it just, I don't think they're ever going to sell out anything else. I mean, you look at all the Van Halens that still haven't come out. You can buy James Taylor all day long. If you want Run DMC, you'll be able to buy that pretty soon. Bruce Springsteen's Ashbury will be coming out for 33 RPM one step for, I think it's $100. I don't think these things are going to sell out anytime soon. I mean, you get the Rarity, which Analogue Productions, threw out Exodus and Rastaman Vibrations at 3,500 copies. And that's another thing too. And I want to talk about Exodus. I mean, we know No Woman, No Cry. It's No Number, No Cry. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that ordered Exodus and got copies that have no numbers. So does that make the value go up higher or lower, knowing that it's supply demand, right? So now there's more supply than there was before. So does that make an aftermarket of Exodus lower or higher? Because now we know for a fact there's way more copies than 3,500.
I'd be bummed out. If I'm going to spend that amount for that record, I want to have a numbered, that's how it was marketed. These are numbered and limited. And of course they have to press more for defects and problems. And that's what this is, obviously, but I'd be kind of bummed.
I talked to Chad about that because I said, hey, so what's going on with this, the number thing? He says there's not very many that are going out without numbers. What he told me. So he didn't give me the exact number, obviously. Why would he? But so I have to take him at his word that there's not a lot going out. But I mean, just reading all, and Nathan I know, Arnaldo as well. I mean, you read all the different forums on Facebook, everyone's posting, hey, I got my Exodus today, doesn't have a number. Hey, I got my Exodus today, doesn't have a number. So I mean, I don't know how, I can't say there was 200 people posting that, but I mean, it seems to be almost an everyday occurrence that you're seeing these Exodus with no number, no cry, So you're right. I'd be bummed out too. I mean, I don't really care about the number. We all know it's irrelevant. They print these, these things at a different shop than the actual pressing. So it makes no difference what your number is. It has no intrinsic value at all, other than the fact that, I got a low number. It doesn't make it worth anymore. It doesn't make any sense to me why we even care about if it's 3,500 or 00001. Who cares?
I think it only matters if you have copy 001.
But no one does. Who's going to have that?
Or copy 3,500.
I saw a couple guys Photoshop their number and put 00. Like, look what I got. They got the 0001. I thought that was quite cute. But yeah, it doesn't matter. I think you're right. And so, yeah. And that's another thing too. You see all these promo copies. Who cares about promo copies? Again, those are not numbered copies either. Why are promo copies going for more than the normal ones? That makes, from a price point, makes no sense from a collectability point either. It's a promo copy. Who cares?
I think
there's an argument to be made there.
Okay, that's why I'm bringing it up. That's why we're doing this. What's the argument?
Back in the 70s and 80s, the promo copies were the ones that were pressed first because they had to go out to reviewers and radio stations. So supposedly you're getting the beginning of the run of the stamper. And I mean, the quality between copy number 1 and copy 1000, when typically you'd have to go to a new stamper, it doesn't degrade really that much. There's not that much different, unless someone pulls out the first copy and the last copy, then we can do a comparison, But I think nowadays, like I work for a record label, we don't stamp any records as promo. There's no more promo stamp. Whatever copies we have, they're part of stock, and they'll go to reviewers or influencers.
Thank you for all those, by the way.
Well, I think that's actually a good point. If you get a promo, then you do know at least that you're getting an early pressing. And so if you're trying to find a copy that's going to sound really, really good, then a promo won't necessarily be that copy, but it might increase your chances of getting one, at least if you know that it's the early pressings that happen to be the best sounding for that particular title. So I guess if you had that knowledge going in, then looking for promos would be a valid way of, if you were going to put together several copies and do a shootout.
But
I know other people. Pardon?
Yeah, sorry. Only if you know for certain that the jacket that has the promo stamp on it, unless the label is stamped promo.
Yeah, I'm talking about
someone may have switched out the record.
Well,
but
that's a good
for white label promos where certain labels had a different blank alternate label that they would press onto the initial copies, which were promo, and in that case, there's no disputing it. But I think maybe in the 80s, at that point, it's like you don't know. It's just the cover says promo on it, but someone may have switched out the dips.
Well, here's a good example. I've got a bunch of MoFi one-step promos. Okay, so that's before it's like the handwritten on the back, so the number was always handwritten. So it says P whatever 0. So I mean, really, they came from the same press as the numbered records as well, right? So I mean, there's really for me, I didn't think it was that big of a deal to get a promo. That's what I'm saying. Maybe back in the 80s, if it was fresh off the press, I can see it being more valuable. But I'm talking today's promos. I don't really care. I don't see any value to it.
I like what Robert said. Back in the 70s, you're increasing your chances if you find these white label promos. I've found several, and who knows how many of these went out and who they went to, but you can see like a record executive getting one of these and just like putting it on a shelf and never even playing it. I've found some that there's zero spindle wear, etc. And
right.
So we have done.
They often don't get played that much. It's a good point. Yeah.
What about the quality of the vinyl itself? I mean, we have to bring that into the conversation a little bit too, right?
Okay.
Actually, it's a good point. I only have a few white label promos, but I have one of the one that comes to mind is Captain Beefheart Clear Spot. And it's a great sounding record, absolutely great, but the vinyl quality actually isn't that good on a white label promo. It's got a lot of noise on it. And it seems like a vinyl problem, not like that it's been played too much problem or handled.
So back in the 80s, and the way I understand this is, with the rise of CDs, the record companies, several of them were using this Qui-X2, kind of this virgin vinyl, Clarity, early days of Clarity vinyl. And one of the best OG pressings I have is this. And you hold it up to a light and
translucent.
It's a purple translucent. It's also a Robert Ludwig, but all of these Qui-X records that I find from the early to late 80s, in my mind or on my system into my ears, they all sound really, really good. Zero noise floor. There's no snap, crackle, pop, unless you've got a beat up record. But that's one thing about quality of the vinyl. Now, another thing, what was I going to mention? I have a few Dynaflex pressings,
Mhm.
and these are like what 100 grams, if that. Maybe even 90. But it's interesting because they kind of marketed Dynaflex as a superior sounding, upgraded vinyl solution. They were very flimsy, but Rock and Roll Animal, Lou Reed, I've got on Dynaflex. I've got Schmilson, one of the Schmilson, Harry Nilsson records is the Dynaflex. It sounds great. I've got a Bowie record on Dynaflex. So it's interesting.
Yeah. Is it Let's Dance? Is that the one that's
No, it's actually Low. It's a repress of Low. Yeah.
I find, being from Canada, my dad was a big collector, so I have his collection, but I have a lot.
Sorry, hunky dory.
120 grams normally of the Canadian pressings, and they sound great to me. Like, I have a lot of the original pressings of everything, and I mean, everything to me sounds pretty dynamite. The vinyls, mint vinyl as well, it was hardly played, so I'm pretty lucky with that. So I'm able to compare a lot of my original Canadians to some of these audiophile pressings, and mostly they stand the test of time. I'll tell you that, the 120 grams a lot of the time anyways.
Yep.
So moving on, I mean, Audiophile, we've got MoFi, we've got Analogue Productions, Craft is coming out, we've got Vinyl Me Please. They're now getting more into the audiophile market. I mean, what do you guys think going forward? Is it oversaturated? Are we going to see a slowdown there in the audiophile industry? I mean, I think I already mentioned, I truly feel MoFi peaked out just around DSD Gate, and I think Analogue Productions, they're going to start churning and doing well. It just depends on the releases that they get going forward, and the price point, right? $40 to $60, I think, for an audiophile pressing. Maybe not the greatest, but not paying ridiculous, stupid prices that you pay right now in a retail shop for a mint condition Miles Davis for $100, right? So that's why the audiophile industry is thriving right now, or at least it has been. Any thoughts?
Well, I thought Nathan had a really good point earlier. Robert was talking about the tone poets, and but a lot of this comes down to accessibility, especially if we look at the jazz arena. Some of those records, we mentioned they're $300, $400, $500 if you can find something that's clean. So it's nice. And the audiophile market, I mean, this is a niche market, isn't it? I mean, what are we talking about as far as around the world? I don't know, but we're not talking about a big mainstream market like in the 70s and 80s that people were buying records because that's the only way you could get the music. It's the only format it was. Well, cassettes as well. But yeah, I think the accessibility thing is interesting. Who knows what's going to happen? They're doing this new revamped OJC series, which is kind of weird because I can go out and get sealed OJCs today. By the way, Robert, I've got an OJC of Way Out West. It's great. Sounds amazing.
Well, you take a look at I just wrote something about Way Out West, actually, that I haven't heard the 80s OJC of Way Out West, but they put one out in 2009 that's actually not terrible. It's actually got a lot of good things about it.
I think that's the one that I have, but anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's you can get them sealed, $20-$25. They're really easy to come by still, actually. Yeah. They have that kind of big, they actually have kind of the big, like, tubey sound that the early pressings have, that just doesn't have the top end resolution. They're just not as transparent, so they just don't have that. They just, they're not great. They're good.
And a lot of the time too, original pressing, the tape's a lot fresher. I mean, we had, obviously that's a big part of it. We talked about Rumours before, and if you guys know the history of the Rumours master tape, they had to splice like their backup tape with their vocal or something like that to really get the final master tape, because they replayed it and used it so many times during the production of Rumours. So they had to go back and time it properly with the percussions and the drums with the rest of the instruments and the vocals, and then splice it all together. They had to hire someone to do do that. So again, obviously some of these tapes are probably pretty, beat up. Rumours, probably one of them. It's nice to have a fresher copy, which is an original copy, because tape was a lot fresher back then than today. So I mean, that's another bonus as well. But it goes back to price point. Do you want to buy? And Nathan said it perfectly. I can buy a $30 Tone Poet. I can buy 10 of those versus one of the same pressing, and then have that. And how much different is it going to be? I mean, we all have different systems. We all have different listening rooms. We mess around with our systems. I mean, everything is so subjective. There's so many variables involved. I mean, you might like, and like Nathan was saying, you might like the Smiley EQ. Arnaldo might like a lot more bass, or, and Robert might like it treble heavy. I don't know. I mean, everyone hears it differently, right? So when you hear these reviews of all these records, a lot of the time, it has to be subjective for everyone, and just take it from, that person that's reviewing, and say, okay, I understand his viewpoint, but you still got to go out there and sort of listen to it for yourself and make the final decision.
And you brought up, yeah. The last time we chatted, Steve, you brought up Asia. You had the listening, test. Don't
tell Mazzy. He doesn't like me talking about Asia. So good thing he's not on this one. Yeah, yeah, Well, I had Asia. I did the blind test with my teenage daughters who never even listened to Steely Dan. They don't care about Steely Dan.
But what I think is interesting is one of the biggest criticisms of that recording is some people don't like the splashy cymbals. They think that it's distorted, it's overblown. The recording isn't great, in particular with the cymbals on that. But if you've ever been near a drum kit, the cymbals splash, right? I mean, you hear that resonance, you hear that distorted sound in there. I'm not saying that it's the most pleasant thing, but it sounds like a real drum kit. For me personally, I'd much rather hear a kit that's a little overblown and sounds like a real drum kit than this muted down, turned down, dynamic, flattened version of it, and that's my preference, though, right? But I know that's often the criticism with I think it was the AB or whichever version it was that you said that you liked from the listening test.
I like the original that was cut by Bernie Grundman, which happened to be one of Bernie Grundman's favorite cuts he's ever done. Just so you know, from his own lips when I talked to him. Yeah. And that's also one that Better Records gave me as a promo as well. So it's AB1006, I think it is.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So one of the best real live drum sounds on record, I think, is if you can get an early Who's Next. The clarity, you can hear, Keith, you can hear the skins of the drum. And that's with the Mastering Lab pressing. They call it the West Coast pressing. And these are easy to find. Doug Sachs had this really distinctive kind of handwriting that you can find in the dead wax. I think the 8s are going to the right. There's like a 40-page thread on Hoffman forums about the best pressings of Who's Next. But anyway, I found 2 or 3 of those early pressings. They're great.
Is that a US pressing?
Yeah, it's a U.S. pressing, and apparently the legend has it is they actually shipped the metalworks and the plates to the U.K. for the first press there. The early one in the U.K. from Doug Sachs. So,
and when the artists themselves endorse like certain copies, right? So I mean, there's been instances where Brian May says this is how it sounded in the studio. This is what we listened to. This is the definitive version of it. Who am I to sit there and say, well, I like more bass or I like more treble? If Brian May is telling you that in the studio, this is what it sounded like, I'm going to trust that that's what he heard and what it should sound like. So,
and that's the argument. That's the argument I had with Miles Scholl as well when I was talking to him, because I have the Alan Parsons box that Parsons label did. And Parsons was a big part of that production, and he actually signed off on everything and listened to everything that Miles sent him and made changes and sent him back notes here and there. So the way Parsons heard it is the way that it sounds on that box. So who are we to basically say it should sound better this way or that way? We don't sell 50 million records in our careers. We're just listeners, right? So you have a good point there. You absolutely have a good point there.
Yeah, especially because I know a lot of people have complained about the Jimmy Page Led Zeppelin remasters, it seems like he was directly involved. Now, if he was happy with how they sounded,
I'm not going
are we to
I'm
question
not
it?
questioning
I
him.
mean,
No.
again, like
Yeah.
it always to what you say, Steve. It's very subjective. It depends on your system. It depends on your ears. It depends on your taste.
Yep.
System,
Yeah.
listening room, everything, your mood for that day as well. I mean, obviously there's a lot of things that could be going on in your head, right? So there's a lot of variables, not just your system. Maybe someone pissed you off, so you want it to sound a certain way. And who knows? I mean, everyone has differences, and that's why it's fun to watch or listen to these reviews of the different records that are out there and the audiophile pressings that are out there. We only have a few more minutes, so you guys brought some more records. I want to start. Arnaldo, do you have anything else? Any other ones that you brought that you want to discuss?
Yeah,
Some of your best sounding stuff.
Well, it's not some of it. These are just things that came to mind.
Yeah.
I'm torn between two. Let's go with this one. Even though it's not the MoFi version, I think this sounds pretty good.
I have that one. I'm assuming that's the Ludwig version, right?
Yes, it's
Yeah,
just a standard version.
It's a standard Ludwig version, and it's one of the best sounding ones because MoFi is going for $300 or $400 or $500. You can pick that up for $50. Why wouldn't you?
But yeah,
I don't think you can make that album sound bad, actually.
right?
Yeah, it's a great album.
I mean,
Yep.
I think was it Robert Ludwig did the original? Yeah, Robert
Yeah,
Ludwig.
it's Ludwig.
Yep. Beautiful.
Nathan, anything? You got anything?
I didn't bring any like actual,
No, it's fine.
examples or whatever, but I just personally I think the David Crosby, the 45 RPM 2 LP super vinyl, if I can only remember my name, I think that is one of my MoFi's shining moments still, and I believe it's still pretty easily available. And I think whenever you look at the cost ratio on that one, I think that's another no-brainer to pick up a copy of that record. And I think, in my opinion, it sounds better than an original copy. It's hard to find an original copy of that album that is clean. So again, that kind of plays into my point earlier that availability and clean is often difficult to find. And then also, when you have a reissue that you can easily get and know that it's going to play clean. So I think that's one, in my opinion, that's still one of MoFi's, gems out there.
Tim, anything else?
I've got two things. I'll go OG and modern. So this is another great sounding record if you can find this. It's also one of those Quai X2 translucent. Really good record, kind of John Hyatt's comeback. He got sober and put out a great record. Ry Cooder's on it. Jim Keltner plays drums. I was tired of hearing Mazzy rave about these MoFi Miles records, and this thing came back up, so I decided to pick one up. And don't have an original, but everybody, Melinda Murphy, everybody raves about the MoFi Miles, so decided to break out and get one of those.
Nice. Robert, what do you have?
I've got my Roxy Music's debut, the very first White Hot Stamper I
That's
ever
a better
bought.
record. There you go. Is it A plus?
I just had a Hot Stamper, and then I traded up for this one. And part of the reason that I wanted to talk about that one was because I got it when my stereo was at a much different place, and played it a few weeks ago after I'd made a bunch of changes, and man, it's an amazing recording, absolutely a stunner. And I don't think very many people realize that.
Nope.
This is a UK pressing. It's not an original. It's a reissue on Polydor, but holy cow, what an amazing sounding record.
Would that be a Ludwig mastering as well?
No, it's I don't believe so.
Okay.
I just picked a copy of that up at a record fair on Sunday, of a first UK pressing.
Oh, nice.
I had a first UK and it sounded terrible, and then I got this one and I was like, wow, that is
it sounded terrible.
They really did a nice job on the remaster on this. That's what I would recommend.
Terrible because of the condition of it, or you didn't like the sound?
No, it wasn't mastered right. It was off. It was a long time ago. I sold it a long time ago, so I don't remember exactly what, but boy, they just the dynamics on that recording are just massive. And I think recordings like with just huge dynamics are just hard to master. It's just tough. I mean, great example, classical music. So I wanted to show this one because this is like, I don't know if you guys are interested in classical music, but holy Toledo, this thing sounds good. And so I found this, I cherry picked a classical collection from a neighbor of mine had, and I got this in there, and I just could not believe how good this record sounded. I mean, the space, there's all this percussion, and just the sound stage is enormous, and everything is clear and has weight to it and has presence to it. I mean, it's absolutely a stunner. So I wrote something about this on my site, and Tom saw it, and he said, we have a white hot stamper that I'm going to send it to you. You can compare it to yours and see if you still think yours is that good. So this was a while back. I still had tubes in my system. And so he sent me the white hot stamper, and I'm going back and forth. And I'm like, I actually think mine sounds better. So I sent it to him, for Tom, that was that was a bold statement, So I sent it to him, and he said, your copy kills mine. Like, we got that one wrong. So that was the only time that's ever happened where, and he said that this copy, if they had this copy, they would have given it the rare A+++ rating.
Wow.
4+ rating, at least on the first side. He never played the second side because he said he hates the second side of this record. So,
well, gentlemen,
he cleaned it for me on their cleaning method. So,
well, gentlemen, thank you. We'll leave it at that for another time. And Robert, thank you for being our special guest today, replacing Mazzy for the week. Did a good job. So, guys, thank you so much for your time. We'll see you again.
See y'all.
Take care, guys. It's been fun.
Thanks, bye.